just want to add a little bit more about Masaccio, and please look at his dates here. He dies very young, and that causes some problems with developments in the Middle Renaissance. Also want you to know that his name is Tommaso, Thomas, and the Accio, Tommaso, Accio is is an ending that you'd put to a name. It refer in Italy, and it refers to this idea that he is big, ugly Tom Masaccio. Not flattering. Again, these names are often not flattering. These nicknames. Evan, you're going to learn about. You just learned about linear perspective, and we'll do a discussion about that. But I also want you to know that one of the innovations to make the works more naturalistic is shadowing, and shadowing that responds to the light that is outside the picture plane, but seen as if it belongs inside the picture plane. In other words, the innovation here of the Middle Renaissance is that these guys are coming up with ways to make the world inside the painting be really just like the world outside the painting. It obeys the same rules of space and light and that kind of stuff. So here's that map of Florence again. Again, there's my church, and there's my state, and where's San Michele's in between. We're going to go to this. This is the church in which the Holy Trinity lives, and then we're going to go to a church across the river. So again, you have seen the video on this, the Trinity, but I just wanted to make sure that you knew who the characters were. I'm not sure the video makes that clear, but yeah, it talked about the Trinity, the three persons of the Godhead, including that Holy Spirit as a bird. Mary and John, or Mary the mother and John the youngest apostle, they're always there at the crucifixion. So that's who those two guys are in the space, kind of slightly closer to us than the crucifixion and the Trinity. And then these two guys this is the man, this is the woman. The rules are like birds. Men are always more colorful than the women. These are the patrons. You've seen patrons in paintings before in Scrovegni Chapel, but Mr. and Mrs. Lenzi. And then this thing, which again is illusionistically is in the world closest to us. It's the altar, the table there on which, religious ceremonies would happen, and an image of a skeleton laid out on a coffin. So in any event, this might be a nice comparison. You can stop the slide and do this on your own. Here's Masaccio, here's Giotto's crucifixion, and here is a crucifixion-ish thing by Masaccio. Do you see the differences? Do you see the ways in which spatial illusion has gotten more sophisticated here? Things that are the same, things that are different. And then lastly, I want to talk about this linear perspective. Again, you saw a small video. Pay attention to this thing called the vanishing point, and the ways in which these orthogonal, i.e. parallel lines that recede into the composition, how they can be used to identify the vanishing point, and then that vanishing point has a significance. Here the vanishing point is at the foot of the altar, and at the foot of the crucifix, the beginning of the altar, probably where our eyes would be if we were standing in front of this painting. So it has that. And then we would be, and then just a little bit more on that skeleton there and some words that the skeleton says to us. Now, the next work of art I want to show you, and it has to do with this idea of shadowing, is, again, that church that's across town, church number 14 on the map. It's, can't remember the name of the church now, but name it. If anyone's interested, just send me an email. It's a chapel, and chapels are, these little smallish rooms off of the major body of the church, and they are bought up by patrons, in this case, the Brancacci family. And, again, in this public demonstration of piety, they're decorated with religious subjects. The Brancacci family hires 3 artists. Masaccio is one of them. Again, remember, he dies early. His buddy Masolino, Little Thomas, actually leaves town and has to be finished by this other guy. But anyway, let's just look at Masaccio's work. The frescoes on the wall are, and it's just here in the lower level, are of the life of Saint Peter. I guess there was a Pietro, a Peter Brancacci, and hence this interest. We're just going to look at this one image. It's called The Tribute Money from the Life of Saint Peter. Part of it is a little old-fashioned in the sense that it's showing us three periods of time. It's not like a snapshot here. We've got three different scenes. The first is here, where the taxpayer is coming to Christ, and he's kind of confronting him, and Christ is standing around with all the apostles, and they've all got their little halos this time, sort of done up kind of interestingly. They're seen illusionistically in space as opposed to just that kind of platter, fascinator type halos. In any event, so the taxpayer is confronting Christ. He says, I need your money for the state. And so the question on the table is, since Christ has in some ways, said that there is no authority but God the Father, my Father, is he going to pay these taxes? Well, Christ, yes, instructs Peter, and Peter's always this guy in yellow with the short white hair, short white beard. He says, yeah, I'll tell you where to find money. It's in the mouth of the fish. Peter is the fisherman. He finds that money, and then he goes over here and he pays the tax collector. I did write taxpayer here. I meant tax collector. Whew, been a long day. Okay, please fix that in your notes. Okay, the wonders of video, that and computers. That is fixed. Tax collector. So the story is kind of a moral. Will Christians pay taxes? It sets up a solution for Christians living in secular states. In any event, I want you to please notice that there's a building in the background that serves to give us a sense of space, linear perspective. It is done in the linear perspective construction, or as are these steps. And so if we were to follow the orthogonal lines, we could find probably a vanishing point, maybe around there, like kind of above the head of Christ, perhaps. But there are two other ways that space is spatial illusions are made, and one is this thing called aerial perspective. It is this idea that objects that are closest to us are fairly hard line, but we see them quite clearly, but our vision, as we move further back into the landscape, our vision kind of fails, and we lose formal clarity, outline, and we lose color. Or at least the color becomes more blue. The blue is more dominant. So here in the mountains in the background, we see exactly that. We see again the aerial perspective, this idea that, now we know that this mountain is way farther away than this mountain, which is of course farther away than that mountain, let's say. The other way in which so atmospheric perspective, but the other way in which this work of art shows three-dimensional form is in its casting of shadows. Check out all these wonderful, wonderful shadows. And I don't mean just the shadow within the body. So within faces, you can see, for example, let's look at young John's face. You can see the light sort of hitting the front of his face and then casting shadows like on the side of his nose, etc. Same here with Peter. So we're talking about not just shadowing the modeling that happens in faces and garments, but also these like strong shadows on the ground. And again, that responds to the window. Go back here. Here's my window. Here's the work of art. The idea is that the light comes in onto these figures that live within the panel and cast shadows in a logical way. And so these are the innovations that Masaccio brings. Again, these really kind of heavy, lumpy figures really occupy space that is defined, by linear perspective, by aerial perspective, and by shadowing.